Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, it's a little gloomy outside at the time of this taping, so I brought in some bright colors to the home studio this week to brighten everyone's day. Over here on this shoulder, of course, I've got my Chelsea home jersey the year after they won the Champions League in anticipation of next week's match. And over here on this shoulder, Nigeria home jersey. Had to get in a lot of green, of course, before next week, St. Patrick's Day. Very excited for this week's episode. I've got a segment centering around a big event next week that I think you all will like. Of course, there's a lot of great, exciting soccer that happened over this past week that we got to get to. But I want to start off by talking about a team that didn't make it into last week's episode due to a little bit of a scheduling conflict, and something that's really big right now that we got to talk about. And before I get to them specifically, I have to make this point. It's incredibly hard these days to repeat as champions across all sports. We just don't see those dynasties right now like we used to. And in soccer, of course, except for maybe a few exceptions in some of the domestic leagues, we're seeing championship turnover every year. When it comes to the English Premier League, in my opinion, from top to bottom, the deepest league in the world, we only saw one repeat champion this past decade, and that, of course, was Manchester City. However, on the flip side, we did see two pretty bad title defenses. Of course, the big one being Chelsea. The year after they won the Premier League, they fell all the way down to 10th place. And Leicester City, after their miracle run to the title the following season, they followed Claudio Ranieri, and of course, they slipped all the way down to 12th. For them, you don't blame them as much because they're not as big of a club, but for Chelsea to fall all the way down to mid-table was quite eye-opening, having just won the title the year before. The expectation of repeating as champions is extremely high, but it is expected of those clubs that win the championship to stay within contention of at least a top four spot, which is what makes what is going on currently at Liverpool that much dire. For the first time in their 129-year history, think about that, 129 years, Liverpool have lost 6 consecutive matches at home, with the past 3 losses being shutout losses. Now, of course, there are some reasons for this slide that can be easily explained. Liverpool have had to suffer through a lot of injuries this season. Of course, started with Virgil van Dijk. It's gone all the way through the midfield with the captain Jordan Henderson. They're just extremely thin back there on defense. Of course, a lack of home field advantage. You, of course, can attribute this to everybody across Europe, what they've had to deal with. But in terms of home field advantage, it could be argued that Anfield is the biggest of them all. And of course, not being able to celebrate their title with a full stadium of fans has had a lot probably had to do with some of Liverpool's struggles. However, it's not like Liverpool are only losing to some of the bigger clubs. During this streak, they've lost to the rivals Everton, which hadn't happened at home since 1999. They've lost to Burnley. They've lost to Brighton. And just recently, they've lost to Fulham. A couple of those teams are near the bottom of the table. They also drew at home 0-0 versus West Brom, which isn't included in the streak because of the draw. So these are some of the clubs that have been struggling throughout the entirety of the season, and Liverpool are just unable to break through at home against these smaller clubs. When you look at Liverpool this season as compared to last season in terms of goals for and goals against, obviously what stands out is the concession of more goals. They've already surpassed last year's total this season. But that, of course, can be contributed to the injuries. Losing the player of the year, Virgil van Dijk, one of your leaders at the back, it can't be calculated how big of a loss that is. And then, of course, when you lose the backup, and you lose the backup to the backup, and you start going through, you're having to make emergency purchases during the January transfer window and trying to implement those players, it's just not going to be as good as that title-winning defense. We've also seen Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson fall off just a little bit. However, the more shocking thing, at least to me, is the fact that they are currently 38 goals behind last year's goal-scoring total. And that has been with pretty much the front 3 of Liverpool being healthy for a majority of the season. Mo Salah got off to a great start to begin the season, but has since gone through a couple of goal-scoring droughts. Sadio Mane really broke through last year with a fantastic season. He has dropped off just a little bit. And then, of course, Roberto Firmino. Look, I get it. He is perfect for the system that they use, that high press that they like to break out. But he is just not a goal-scoring forward at the moment. He doesn't really contribute at all on the offensive end, especially where they need him to the most. That's the number 9 position, basically, right? That's the goal-scoring position, and he is not dependent upon right now to put in those goals. When you look back from the front 3, really the only other person that's contributing is Diego Jota when he gets into the game. But in terms of that other 3 in the midfield, kind of where like Georgie Wijnaldum and some of those other guys play, just not a lot of goal scorers back there. So, of course, if the front 3 are not firing on all cylinders, they're not going to be scoring a lot of goals this year. And that seems to be the case. Again, 38 goals off the pace from last year's total, and there are only 10 matches remaining in the Premier League this season. Now, of course, the culture of European football has led to some fans calling for the sacking of Jurgen Klopp, which is just ludicrous. I mean, Liverpool have been on an amazing run of form over the past few seasons. Klopp has led them through uncharted waters during this pandemic. And honestly, when you talk about some of the biggest clubs in the world, certain players come to mind. But when you ask me about Liverpool, the first thing that comes to my mind is Jurgen Klopp. He's not only a fantastic manager, but he's a fantastic motivator. And again, he has helped Liverpool reach their potential over these past few seasons. So it doesn't make sense to sack him. But in terms of criticizing this season, honestly, again, I know about the injuries. I know about the lack of a home field advantage. But in terms of his philosophy, in terms of his tactics, he hasn't really made adjustments, not just in these matches, but in this season overall, in terms of the circumstances that have befallen the club. Not being able to make adjustments and get them out of this slide right now, there warrants criticism, especially considering how far they have fallen off from the top four. They're now down into 8th place in the table as we head into this weekend, and they are 7 points, I believe, behind Chelsea in 4th place. Again, Liverpool, it's really tough to repeat as champions, especially in the Premier League, but the fact that they are this far from the top four this late into the season, I think definitely warrants a little bit of criticism. However, let's look at the bright side. Liverpool are still in the Champions League. It's a competition that they recently won a couple seasons ago, so they have the experience and pedigree to make a run here late, win the competition, and of course that means they'll qualify for it next season. If that doesn't work out, they still have the talent, even with all the injuries that they've had, to make a late run here, to get into the top four in the Premier League and qualify for the Champions League next season that way. However, option C, if both of those efforts fail, unfortunately, it seems as though Liverpool are just going to be the latest club to suffer a championship hangover that was a little bit more powerful than it should have been. So that's my take on Liverpool. It was quite shocking to me to watch Chelsea boss them around at times during last week's match at home, but I don't think we're headed for a Chelsea or a Leicester City type scenario. I definitely think Liverpool will be in it to the end of the season for a Champions League spot. I definitely think they can make a run, but time is running out. And again, 129-year history that they've lost 6 consecutive matches at home, just quite shocking to me. Something definitely that needed to be highlighted. Now I want to move on, of course, to the bigger matches from this past week. Of course, I'm talking about the Champions League. We have our first 4 quarterfinalists. Very exciting. Some high-level matches, some really great late drama in some of these matches. But of course, like I said, we have our first 4 quarterfinalists. I want to break them all down here from this past week in the Champions League. First up, Borussia Dortmund hosting Sevilla FC in the second leg of their tie. The theme of this week's matches, at least to me, seemed to be that the teams that needed to come out as the aggressors were able to do so, but they just couldn't put away their early chances. Sevilla definitely came out as the aggressors here in this match. They had a lot of good play for the first opening, 20 to 30 minutes or so, but a turnover possession in their half led to the first of 2 Erling Haaland goals on the night. Yusuf Al-Nesri of Sevilla scored a couple of goals late on in the second half to make things interesting, but the match would finish up 2-2, and that meant that Borussia Dortmund advanced 5-4 on aggregate. With his 2 goals, Haaland became the youngest and fastest player to reach the 20-goal mark in Champions League history. So I had this tie pretty much right. There were a lot of goals. Dortmund's defense is definitely a concern going forward, but when you've got a guy like Haaland, you basically can ride him as far as you can go. Obviously, the MVP of this tie, scoring multiple different goals, setting new goal-scoring records, breaking all of Mbappe's previous Champions League records. He's just fantastic. Always in the right place at the right time. Clinical. Of course, he's got his power. Of course, he's got his speed. And he was able to lift Dortmund up in this tie. Remember, they didn't have Jadon Sancho for either of these 2 matches. And they were able to score enough goals, again, to hold off Sevilla, who, again, I think did really well in this tie. They just couldn't handle right now what is honestly one of the best players in the world. Dortmund going forward, again, defense is a little bit of concern, depending upon who they match up with, could be their downfall. But when you've got Haaland, anything is possible right now, and he is just doing an excellent job of leading Dortmund through the Champions League. Also on the same day as Dortmund and Sevilla, easily the craziest fixture and the biggest upset of the tournament so far, FC Porto knocking out Cristiano Ronaldo and Juventus, losing 3-2 in extra time on the day, but advancing 4-4 on aggregate due to away goals. This match was crazy. It started with another early mistake from Juventus, who gifted Porto a penalty, which they were able to convert for the 1-0 lead. Federico Chiesa, who is obviously Juve's MVP, scored his second and third goal of the tie in the second half, The second, which came after Porto were reduced to 10 men. I didn't think the red card was deserved. Kind of reminded me of what happened to Robin van Persie versus Barcelona all those years ago. But the match finished in normal time 2-1, which means we were tied 3-3 on aggregate on away goals, which means, of course, we go to extra time. In the second period extra time, as late on in the match as you can get, Juve were the masters of their own downfall once again. Porto had a free kick on the outside of the box. They took it. Powerful strike, yes, but it goes under the wall. The entire wall jumps. It actually goes through Cristiano Ronaldo's legs. It surprises goalkeeper Wojciech Szczesny, who was unable to get a strong palm to it, and it trickled into the back of the net. That, of course, meant that Juve would have to score twice because they couldn't tie based on away goals. They were able to get one goal immediately following that, Adrian Rabiot with a nice little header in the box, but they weren't able to get the second. And the match, of course, ended 3-2 on the scoreboard, but in terms of aggregate, Porto advanced on away goals. This was just shocking to me. I cannot believe that this happened to a team like Juventus, who are so disciplined, who are so strong. All 4 goals they conceded in this tie were just incredibly terrible, bad mistakes. Fundamentals of soccer were ignored. If there was any other manager than Andrea Pirlo, who of course is a legend, former player of Juventus, I think they would have been sacked. This was incredibly disappointing. Ronaldo doesn't score during this entire tie. He helped set up maybe a couple of those goals, but to not get on the scoreboard here when your team needs it the most, they just dug themselves too big of a hole. And to see that from a team like Juventus, it's quite shocking. Full credit to Porto. They were adventurous. They dared to go forward against a very defensive-minded juggernaut, and they were able to convert their chances. Juventus were just not clinical enough in front of net and extremely undisciplined on the back end. So Porto, who are no slouches, they always make it to this part of the Champions League. Were able to take advantage of Juve just not being on form on either of these matches, and were able to pull off the upset here in the round of 16. Next up, of course, was the marquee matchup of the week, and the big question going in was, could Barcelona pull off another miracle comeback versus PSG? It certainly looked that way early on. They had plenty of opportunities and a chance to start that comeback, but PSG shut the door on them. The match ended in a 1-1 draw, which meant PSG advanced to the quarterfinals 5-2 on aggregate. A wonder strike from Lionel Messi, which if you haven't seen it by now, you must live under a rock, canceled out an early Kylian Mbappe penalty, which meant Barcelona still needed to score 3 goals to complete the comeback. They looked like they might be on their way just before halftime when they were able to win a penalty. However, goalkeeper Keylor Navas stepped up, he guessed the right way, and he was able to stop Messi's penalty shot, and that pretty much sucked the life out of Barcelona's comeback attempt. PSG tightened things up a little bit in the second half, but the overall theme of this match was that Barcelona had numerous opportunities. They hit the post maybe once or twice, and some of their guys just in front of net were not able to capitalize. They couldn't finish off their chances. And of course, like I said, the match ended in a draw, and they fell way short of getting to tie up that aggregate and advance to the quarterfinals. It was just tough to watch again. Antoine Griezmann, and especially Ousmane Dembele, who made all of the right runs in this match. He got into some great positions in the box, but he could just not put away his chances. One shot would go flying over the bar. The next didn't have enough power to it. And then the next one, Navas would make a great save. He just could not get it to go. And of course, Messi couldn't do everything on that day. The penalty miss is huge. That pretty much was where the match turned right before halftime. But still, at the end of the day, it was going to be a lot for Barcelona to overcome this type of deficit. PSG were able to handle things on their end and tighten things up on defense. And of course, that first leg is what won them this tie. Of course, the big news coming out of this match was, for the first time in 16 years, neither Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo made it to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Now, of course, that has led to everyone saying, is this an end of the era? Hold your horses on that. I don't think Messi and Ronaldo are quite done yet. There were some obvious flaws with them, their game plan, and especially with their clubs this season that were exposed by other of the two opponents. I definitely think that they will be back. Was this Messi's final Champions League match for Barcelona? Who knows? Was this Cristiano Ronaldo's final Champions League match for Juventus? I think that question can also be raised now. But I think they'll be back better than ever, either with their current clubs or next year with different clubs. I definitely think they'll find a way to qualify for the Champions League next season. But again, PSG, they smashed Barcelona in that first leg, gave them a nice cushion, and they were able to hold on to it to move on to the quarterfinals. And lastly, returning to Budapest for the second leg, Liverpool were able to control the match before late goals from Mo Salah and Sadio Mane were able to seal the 2-0 win on the day and the 4-0 win overall on aggregate. In the first half, it was the same story it's been for the past couple of weeks for Liverpool. They struggled in front of goal, but they were able to keep things a little bit quiet on the defensive end before eventually Salah and Mane were able to break through. So another nice professional win here from Liverpool, something they desperately needed. They now move on to the quarterfinals. This is obviously going to be their focus for the rest of the season, since the top four in the Premier League seem to be close to being out of reach. Can they do it? Obviously, again, they were winners a couple seasons ago. Can they recreate some of that magic going forward? So those were the matches from this past week in the Champions League. Before moving on, I want to quickly preview the other 4 matches coming up next week, starting off with Manchester City versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. I think the only hope for the visiting side is if they can get an early goal, kind of try to replicate the United game plan from last weekend. If they can really go for it early, be the aggressors, and convert one of their chances, could really put some pressure on Manchester City and change up their game plan. Otherwise, this should be a comfortable Manchester City victory, and they should be moving on to the quarterfinals. Next up, Real Madrid versus Atalanta. Can Madrid control the pace and the tactical battle of this match? I think Madrid are going to want to keep Atalanta contained. They do not want this to get into an open, up and down type of match with Atalanta's aggressive system that they play. If they're able to control the tempo, play their style of ball, and probably nick in a goal from maybe like Karim Benzema or somebody else, they should get a comfortable victory. Obviously for Atalanta, they want to put the pressure on Real Madrid. They want to make this a fast-paced match. And of course, obviously, they probably want to get an early goal to kind of even things up early on. So be interesting to see, again, contrasting styles. If Madrid stays in control, they should be the ones advancing to the quarterfinals. Up next, the big one for me, Chelsea versus Atletico Madrid. The key to this match will be, can either side avoid collapsing into a defensive shell? Chelsea have that narrow 1-0 lead from the first leg on aggregate, but they cannot rest with that lead. I know they've been struggling in front of net recently, and they've been playing good defense, but they cannot depend upon that. They cannot fall back and let Atletico be the aggressors. Get a goal early, extend that lead, and continue to push forward, and they will be able to advance to the quarterfinals. For Atletico, again, I know it's their philosophy to be defensive-minded, but they're down already, and they need that away goal that could crucially flip the tie in their favor. If they're able to do that, and maybe even add another, that would definitely demoralize Chelsea again, who have been struggling in front of net. So Atletico, they have to be the aggressors because they have to be. And as for Chelsea, it is in their best interest to come out firing and attempting to score a goal early on in order to move on to the quarterfinals. And lastly, Bayern Munich versus Lazio. No deep analysis here. Can Lazio avoid losing by a historic margin? They're down by a lot of goals. They're going to have to play wide open and aggressive. That, of course, plays into Bayern Munich's favor. I don't think there's any chance of an upset here. Of course, I know that I'm opening myself up to criticism if it does happen, but I think we'll see pigs fly before we see Lazio come back against Bayern Munich, who right now, in my opinion, are the best club in the world. So those matches will wrap up the round of 16 in the Champions League. I believe the quarterfinals draw will happen next Friday after those matches. In my opinion, I think everybody's going to want to play Porto, but we just saw what they did to Juventus. So there's going to be no easy outs in the next round of the Champions League. So I'm really excited about this next segment. Obviously, soccer is my biggest passion, but I love all sports. And one of the things that I love the most is March Madness. We didn't get either of the men's or women's college basketball tournaments last year, but they're back this year. And of course, Selection Sunday for the men's tournament is coming up this weekend. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of imagine what would a March Madness type tournament look like in world football. Now, I'm not going to do a full 64 team bracket here, but I thought it would be cool to categorize some of the clubs from the season as what they would look like if they were put into a bracket and which group they would go into. So the first group I want to categorize is the number 1 seeds. Who would be the top 4 teams, one for each part of the bracket? I think it's obvious who should be the number 1 overall seed. That, of course, is Bayern Munich, the reigning Champions League winners, the winners of the Bundesliga. They've just been playing some tremendous football. Got one of the best players in the world in Robert Lewandowski. Clear choice for who would be number 1 overall. Another number 1 seed has to be Manchester City. What they've been able to do, not just in the Premier League, but overall, having that 21 match winning streak for the latter part of this season. Pep Guardiola, one of the best managers in the world, if not the best manager in the world. Such depth, such ferocity would be an excellent number 1 seed. Another number 1 seed, despite the fact they are not currently leading in their domestic league, I think would be PSG, based off of the fact of their talent. They got Kylian Mbappe and Neymar, 2 of the top 10 offensive players in the world, and the fact that they just crushed Barcelona in the Champions League, I think would put them over the top as a number 1 seed. As for the last number 1 seed, this was a tough choice, but I ultimately went with Inter Milan. I think Serie A is a little bit deeper this year, and I think that Inter's ability to take control of that league at the moment is extremely impressive. They've got a top-tier coach. They've got top tier players up front, especially. And I think the fact that the run that they've recently been on, I think would again be enough to put them into this spot and put them over some of the other teams I'll talk about here in a moment as the other #1 seed. The next group is the contenders. These would be your #2 or #3 seeds. Still excellent choices to win the tournament. Of course, you got to start off with the La Liga clubs. Atletico Madrid, who are currently leading in La Liga, Real Madrid, and Barcelona, the blue bloods of that league, and of course, some of the top clubs in the world, I think would still be excellent choices, despite the fact that they've either dropped off in La Liga or they've been eliminated from the Champions League, still would make excellent choices to win this style of tournament. Of course, another great, contender would be Manchester United. We've seen just recently what they can look like when they're at the top of their game, beating Manchester City 2-0. Of course, they have that ability to slip off just a little bit, but still, based off of their name, their pedigree, and what they've been able to accomplish this year, they would still have to be considered a contender. Somebody else on this list as well, a couple of Serie A clubs, AC Milan and Juventus, again, based off of star power, what they've been able to accomplish this season, and what they've been able to do in Serie A, which again, like I said, I think is a much deeper league than in years past. I also want to mention RB Leipzig, still in contention in the Bundesliga, always in the bracket. There's one of those, lower level schools that makes it to a 2 seed or a 3 seed that could still be considered to have an outside shot at winning March Madness. I think Leipzig fits the mold here. Got a lot of attacking talent. They've been great over the past few seasons, and I definitely think, especially since they're in contention in the Bundesliga still, they would work their way up to either a 2 or a 3 seed. The next category of teams are your mid-majors. These are smaller teams that are trendy picks that people love to support, but they just don't get to see that they probably deserve because of the fact they just aren't as big as some of the other teams. I want to start off by mentioning Borussia Dortmund. I know that over the years, they've really grown in popularity. Of course, they've had a lot of success on the world stage, but still, they're not as big of a club as some of the other clubs across Europe. And in terms of their success, they haven't really been able to break through, with a big-time trophy in the Bundesliga or in the Champions League. But still, trendy pick. A lot of people love Dortmund, and they excellently fit here in a bracket as a mid-major. Another mid-major team would be Leicester City. We've seen them have success in the English Premier League. Currently, they're in 3rd place this season. Obviously, a few seasons ago, they were able to win it all. We've seen them have some success not only in the Champions League, but also in the Europa League over the past couple seasons. They've stayed near the top, and I think they'd be an interesting pick that would garner a lot of fan support as a mid-major type in this tournament. Some other clubs I would categorize as mid-majors. Lille, they're currently in 1st place in Ligue 1 in France. They've been a nice surprise. How about Ajax, a name people will recognize, but coming from the Dutch league, I think they would fit more nicely as a mid-major. And then how about Sporting from the Portuguese league? Right now, they're currently in 1st place with a little bit of a dominating lead over the likes of Porto and Benfica. So I think they'd be an excellent addition to the mid-majors category. Teams that maybe aren't going to be quite as in contention for the title, but who can definitely pull off a couple of upsets in a March Madness type tournament. And lastly, I think everybody's favorite category, the Cinderella teams, the teams that have no real chance at winning the title, but who could pull off a couple of memorable upsets and be fan favorites in this type of tournament. I want to start off by talking about Rangers. I haven't highlighted what they've been able to do this season. They've been absolutely dominant. I think they've already wrapped up the Scottish Premiership title. Of course, with Steven Gerrard at the helm, that's an excellent story there. By no means am I trying to call Rangers a small club, but going up against the likes of a Manchester City maybe, they'd be a huge underdog, and they'd be able to garner a lot of fan support that way. How about Leeds United making their return to the English Premier League finally? I know they're in mid-table at the moment. They would kind of sneak in as a bubble team into this tournament format, but they're very capable of pulling off an upset based off of the way that they play. A couple of other smaller clubs who are right now in mid-table that I want to highlight here in this category, one of them being Sassuolo in Serie A. They had a great start to the year. They've fallen off a little bit to mid-table, but they showed early on that they can play with the big boys. It would be a cool story as a bubble-type team. The other team is Metz, not the New York Mets. Metz in Ligue 1 in France. They finished last year in 15th place after being recently promoted to Ligue 1. This year, they are currently in 7th place. Quite a meteoric rise, and they would be an excellent bubble-type team to get in, stir the pot, maybe cause an upset in this type of tournament. And lastly, while I don't think they would be the only American representation in a March Madness-style tournament, got to chuck in the reigning MLS champions, the Columbus Crew SC. Wouldn't it be so cool to see them go up against the likes of, a Borussia Dortmund, an all-yellow type of affair, or one of the biggest clubs in the world, somebody like a Real Madrid, just to see how they could do if they could pull off the upset in a one-and-done, winner-take-all type of format. It would be really cool to see. Obviously, the fact that MLS hasn't had much success in the CONCACAF Champions League, they haven't been able to move on and to go up against some of the other big clubs in those other types of tournaments. Hopefully one day that happens, but it really be cool in a 64 style type of tournament, how many MLS clubs or American clubs could get into it and how they could do against some of the best on the world stage. But just kind of a cool little look at March Madness and what putting some of these clubs in, how would you categorize them, how they would fare in this tournament. And again, it's just one of the best times of the year. You got Selection Sunday coming up here in just a couple days, but I just thought I'd give my thoughts on how you would apply March Madness to world football. All right, moving on to talk some soccer in America. And I want to start off with the big news from MLS from this past week, which was the league's announcement of the opening weekend schedule of the upcoming 2021 season. I want to highlight a few of those matches for you all here. Expansion club Austin FC will have their hands full in their inaugural match when they travel to California to take on LAFC. The reigning champions, Columbus Crew SC, will play host to last year's Supporters Shield winners, Philadelphia Union. Inter Miami CF will host David Beckham's former club, LA Galaxy, and their new head coach, Greg Vanney. And lastly, we're going to get a rematch of last year's Western Conference Finals when the Seattle Sounders FC hosts Minnesota United FC. Also of note, the 3 Canadian clubs will not start the season in Canada due to that country's restrictions because of the pandemic. So Montreal and Toronto are going to start off play in Florida, while Vancouver will be playing their matches in Utah. So again, very exciting to see the opening weekend slate of the MLS schedule. Really looking forward to seeing Columbus unveil their banner, of course, and also face off a great opponent in Philadelphia. Of course, very interested to see how Austin FC comes out of the gate. Really tough match to have to go on the road to play LAFC, their very first match, but we'll see how they do. And of course, yeah, that rematch of the Western Conference Finals, Seattle, Minnesota, should be a very entertaining affair. So I know in the coming weeks, MLS will release the rest of the schedule. I don't know if they're releasing just one half of it or if they're going to release the full schedule, but still, we're getting very close to the beginning of the MLS season. Another big story from the league office from this past week was that MLS is investigating Inter Miami CF over the signing of French international Blaise Matuidi last summer. Matuidi was brought in using targeted allocation money instead of being a designated player, but the investigation is centered over if he was paid additional money with the knowledge from the club. So yeah, this is disappointing to hear. I know Miami have kind of done things a little bit haphazardly since entering MLS. And yeah, when Matuidi was originally brought in, I definitely thought he would be brought in as a designated player because of his stature. Hopefully everything is on the up and up and the league okays it and we can move on from this. I hate to see Miami get dinged up for something this early on into their MLS life. And lastly, there was a signing from this past week that stirred up a little bit of nostalgia on my end, especially for Seattle Sounders FC fans, when the club announced the re-signing of forward Fredy Montero. A member of the inaugural MLS squad, Montero scored 47 goals and added 34 assists during his tenure with the club from 2009 to 2012. After a few brief stops abroad, Montero has spent 3 of the last 4 seasons with Vancouver Whitecaps FC. So this was just really cool to see. Now, obviously, we have St. Louis City SC. So this was just really cool to see. I was a big fan of Seattle back in the day, and that was in a large part due to Fredy Montero, just an excellent clinical goal scorer. Now you add him to the mix to some of those great offensive players that Seattle already has. Very exciting to see him back with this club to put on that bright green iconic shirt. And we'll see what he's able to accomplish. He's been playing in MLS here for the past few seasons. Now he goes back to his original club. And yeah, very excited to see what he can bring towards this season. Next up, going to talk some women's soccer. I want to start off with UEFA Champions League. We had the second legs of those matchups this week of the round of 16. And no surprise, most of the big clubs were able to move on to the quarterfinals. The headliner, of course, is Lyon. They are now unbeaten in 30 straight Champions League matches and the obvious favorites going forward to win it all. They were joined by Manchester City, who had another dominating performance. Sam Ewis scoring another couple goals in that match. Fantastic to see her on fire right now. Also joined by Chelsea, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Wolfsburg, and most likely PSG after they play their match here in a couple of days. Rounding out the final 8 is Swedish club Rosengard. So again, exciting times in the Women's Champions League. I know the draw is happening this weekend, a little bit outside of my taping time, but wouldn't it be cool at some point to see Manchester City versus Lyon? The way Sam Ewis is playing, and of course, Rose Lavelle and Abby Dahlkemper also on that squad, it'd be really cool to see them going up against the world's best at the moment. But still been an entertaining tournament so far and looking forward to see some of these bigger clubs going up against each other. Up next, U.S. Soccer announced that the U.S. Women's National Team will be going up against Sweden in a friendly on April 10th in Stockholm as they continue to prepare for this summer's Olympics. U.S. Soccer also announced that they're trying to finalize another opponent for the national team to play 3 days later. So again, another excellent opportunity for the U.S. to continue to evaluate their squad ahead of the Olympics. They're going up against a really quality opponent in Sweden, someone who's given them some trouble in the past, especially when it comes to the Olympics. So again, yeah, good opportunity to continue to see some of these players round into form and also see who could potentially, be on the bubble for the upcoming Olympic team. And lastly, the NWSL also had a big schedule drop this week when they announced the schedule and broadcast details of the 2021 NWSL Challenge Cup. Everything kicks off April 9th with a rematch of last year's final between the Houston Dash and the Chicago Red Stars. On that same night, Portland Thorns FC, one of the favorites for this year's tournament and for this season overall, will be taking on Kansas City in their first match since joining the NWSL in December of 2020. The following day, expansion club Racing Louisville FC will begin their tenure in the NWSL when they play host to the Orlando Pride. 4 of the tournament's matches will be broadcasted on CBS Sports Network, with the remaining fixtures broadcasted on Paramount Plus, with the final on May 8th being broadcasted on CBS. So again, very exciting to see this news. Going to be interesting to see how many people flock to Paramount Plus and pick up that streaming service, considering that most of these matches will be on there. But still, this is going to be an excellent showcase for the NWSL. Very excited to see that rematch to open up this tournament between Houston and Chicago. Of course, there are going to be a lot of teams involved with this. Again, like I said, Portland got to be considered one of the favorites because of the offseason moves that they had. But this should be another exciting rendition of this tournament. So glad it's back. And now, of course, it's going to be on the streaming service. But it's also important as we continue to grow the fans of this league that the final is going to be on CBS. So again, very exciting news. That is actually going to kick off before MLS. So hopefully they'll take advantage of that little bit of an early start and people will tune in for these great matches. And lastly, let's go through some of the latest and biggest transactions from this past week in the USL Championship, starting off with Indy 11 announcing the transfer of forward Cal Jennings to LAFC. Jennings becomes the 4th player from Indy to make the jump to MLS this offseason, despite the fact that he never actually played for the club. Jennings was signed in December of 2020 after a very impressive rookie season with Memphis 901 FC, where he put in 9 goals. So another good bit of business from Indy. 4 players moving on to MLS this offseason. That's really impressive from this club. Of course, it's good for them on their end, but it's also good for these players to continue their professional development and to move on to the next level. So very interesting. Didn't even play a match, but making a big move up to LAFC. So congrats to Cal and congrats to Indy for helping out with these players' development and also just doing good business. Next up, former New Mexico United goalkeeper Cody Mizell became the latest at that position to make the jump to MLS after he was transferred to New York City FC. Mizell helped lead New Mexico United to the USL Championship playoffs in each of their first 2 seasons, recording 119 saves and 11 shutouts in 51 appearances. So congrats to Mizell, who's been successful at pretty much every stop of his career. Now moving on back up to MLS with NYCFC. Hopefully he'll have an opportunity to compete for the starting goalkeeper position there, but still had a tremendous career, great time and success with New Mexico, and hopefully he'll be able to continue his development at the next level. And lastly, another big signing for Phoenix Rising FC, who announced last weekend the return of defender James Musa. Musa played for Phoenix in 2018 and during their record-breaking run in 2019, but spent last season with Minnesota United FC, where he made 6 appearances. So this is probably a good move for Musa. He's going to get some more playing time, and he moves back to a familiar environment and a winning environment in Phoenix to help finish what they started last season and help them win the USL Championship title. All right, it's time to transition over to some St. Louis soccer news. And of course, I got to start off with someone who has caught fire in recent weeks on the world stage. And of course, I'm talking about St. Louis native Josh Sargent. He has scored a goal in 3 straight matches, including on Wednesday in a 2-0 win over Arminia Bielefeld. His other goals were the match winner in Werder Bremen's 2-1 win over Eintracht Frankfurt and Bremen's only goal in their 1-1 draw versus FC Cologne. So this is what I've been preaching with Sargent. He's still been starting, and now the goals are starting to pile in. He's been at the right place at the right time. One of those goals was a beautiful header. Another was he was on the goal line for a simple tap in. So again, he's been getting that consistent playing time. Now the goals are coming. He's caught fire. Big test this weekend, though. Bremen going up against Bayern Munich at home. Don't know if the goal streak will continue, but still, it's been awesome to see Sargent get this type of success. Hopefully it continues, and hopefully that type of success will eventually bleed over to U.S. men's national team. Next up, we got to talk about the group of former St. Louis FC players who signed for new clubs over this past week. Let's start with two guys who signed for Memphis 901 FC. Last weekend, it was former St. Louis FC goalkeeper and St. Louis native John Berner. And just yesterday, it was former St. Louis FC winger Kadeem Dakers. Berner made 2 starts last season for St. Louis FC, making 6 saves, while as for Dakers, he spent the past 3 years with St. Louis, scoring 6 goals in 73 regular season appearances, and he was a part of both playoff teams. Congrats to both these guys for finding a new club not that far from St. Louis, which will be an excellent opportunity for fans to go out and watch them. With Berner, he's had a lot to deal with in his career as far as injuries go, but he's worked his way back up to fitness, and I'm hoping he gets an opportunity at the starting goalkeeper job at Memphis. As for Kadeem, man, he's been such a workhorse and a great ambassador for St. Louis over the past few seasons. Tremendous winger with pace and all around just a great guy and a great teammate. So congrats to both those guys. Moving on to Memphis. Another signing that happened yesterday was Oakland Roots SC announcing the signing of striker Tyler Blackwood. Blackwood scored 13 goals and added 3 assists in 40 regular season appearances with St. Louis FC, not even across more than just 1 full season. And of course, he helped lead St. Louis to the playoffs last year. So it's just really good to see more former St. Louis FC players find new clubs. There's still a handful of them out there who should definitely be picked up by some of the clubs here in America, hoping that they get their opportunity as well to continue their professional career. Next up, we got an announcement this week from the MASL about the upcoming format for the 2021 playoffs. I have it for you here. It's got a lot of details to it, so I'm just going to kind of read off the sheet here. The regular season champion will receive a first round bye, while the number 2 and number 3 teams will select their first round opponent, with the remaining teams facing each other. The first round will be a home-and-home series, with a third mini game being played if the series is even, and that pretty much goes for every round throughout the playoffs. The semifinals will take place in Kansas City, with the number 1 seed choosing its opponent and the other teams facing each other. For the final, if 2 West Coast teams make it, it'll take place in Ontario. Here's the kicker, though. If any team other than 2 West Coast teams make it, the final will be played at the Family Arena in St. Charles. The Ambush are currently in 4th place. So big opportunity, maybe, if the Ambush are able to make a late run here, get into the playoffs, win a couple of series, they could be playing the final at their home stadium. It would be a really cool opportunity for them. Of course, a little bit of a run here as of late. They should be able to get in, but it's important for them to get that number 3 seed because then they'll have the opportunity to choose their opponent. Otherwise, they're at the mercy of the other higher seeds in the playoffs. So again, I think the Ambush are going to qualify here and be in a decent spot, even if they don't get 3rd place, but still would be nice to be able to choose their first round opponent. So important match coming up here this weekend. I'll have a little bit more here on the Ambush with my guest coming up. And lastly, just want to provide a quick update on SLU men's and women's soccer. Both of them will be starting up conference play this weekend at home. SLU men's soccer is coming off a 2-0 win versus Lipscomb after they were upset the previous week by Columbia College. SLU women's soccer are coming off of a very tough 1-0 overtime loss to number 16 Oklahoma State this past weekend. So yeah, it's tough that both SLU teams had some tough losses once they got nationally ranked, but still, they're in a pretty good spot, and now they jump into conference play where both were picked in the preseason to win the A-10, so hopefully they take care of business here and get one of the higher seeds for the upcoming A-10 tournament and continue their push and having a great season. So to wrap up the show, I brought back a guest to talk a little bit about the Ambush's push towards the playoffs, as well as give his thoughts on some of the other recent St. Louis soccer news from the past couple of weeks. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm honored to be joined by, again, broadcast correspondent from the Dare Sports Media, who covers soccer here in St. Louis and provides play-by-play for the St. Louis Ambush. Santiago Beltran. Santiago, it's been good to be talking to you again.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about soccer. I could talk about soccer all day, so very excited.
Exactly. Love your passion, love your insight, and love what's going on right now in St. Louis. Let's start off with the Ambush, because right now they are headed towards the end of their regular season, and they're on a roll once again. They've won 3 of their past 4 matches to get up to 4th place in the table. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about, since you're at these matches calling the games, how have they looked? I know they picked up a few new players midway through the season to add to their roster, guys getting healthy again. How are things going?
No, so as you said, they won 3 of their last 4. They have a really good team. Had some like injuries, some issues with COVID during the season. So they had a rough patch. Like mid-season, they lost 3 games in a row, and they only had like 13 players on the roster. and a lot of those players weren't like the usual players, like the starters. So they had good momentum. Like they beat the Florida Tropics, which they were undefeated at that point, and then they lost three in a row, had injuries, COVID protocols, and they couldn't put together a full team. So lost three in a row, but then they kind of got back on track, beat San Diego Sockers. They played back-to-back games over a couple of weekends ago. And San Diego has a really good team. They have players who play for the Mexican national team, some players who also play for the US team. And St. Louis looked really good, played really well on defense, won both games. And then last weekend, they hosted the Ontario Fury, which also was one of the top teams. And things didn't really go well. Ontario scored like two goals within the first 2 minutes. At the end of towards mid first half, the score was 7-0. The ambush kind of came back, scored 3 goals. They were close to scoring a fourth goal towards the end of the second quarter, but Ontario has a great goalkeeper, and thanks to him also, ambush couldn't score more goals. But second half, like it was um, it was like very close, like the third quarter, but then fourth quarter things fell apart, and Ontario ended up winning by like 6-7 goals. Then the ambush bounced back and won the next one. They won the next game, and now they have a record of 7-7, so 500. Have an opportunity tomorrow night to finish with a winning record. Tomorrow night is the last game of the season, and the ambush hasn't had a winning record in a while, so I think that will be a great accomplishment, and it will also give the team a lot of confidence going into the playoffs, which start the week of March 23rd.
Well, let's get that, because obviously it would be a great accomplishment for them to reach above 500 for the season. But in terms of their finish in the standing, it's more important than ever, right? It's not just about qualifying for the playoffs this year. There's a little bit of an added bonus to it. So let's talk about it. They just announced the playoff format here in a couple weeks. It's actually an interesting caveat, because I've actually seen this type of format discussed in other sports about being able to choose your opponent. And that's what the top few seeds will have the opportunity to do. If St. Louis, if things fall right, they potentially could be in third place and have the opportunity to choose their opponent for that first round. Talk to me a little bit about the impact that would be in terms of having to get to choose their opponent and how this could work in their favor.
So yeah, first thing Ambush has to do is win tomorrow night, and then if other results with a couple more teams go Ambush's way, Ambush will finish third on the table. So the league has 7 teams this year. All the teams will make it to the playoffs, but as you said, there is an added bonus. The number 1 team on the table will get a bye and make it to the semifinals automatically. Then teams number 2 and number 3 get to choose their opponent from the rest of the field. So team number 2 picks first, and then team number 3 picks whoever they want to pick from the remaining teams. So it would be good to finish third and have a chance to pick the opponent. Obviously, based on what we saw during the season, there are matchups that will play in favor of the ambush. But to be honest, like the playoffs is a new tournament. So even the team that is last on the table, the Dallas Psychics, they have won 1 or 2 games during the season, but it's a new tournament, and I wouldn't be surprised if whoever picks Dallas thinking that it's going to be an easy matchup, Dallas could give them a surprise or give them a run for their money. These teams have played each other at least once. Everybody has played everybody at least once, so they kind of know each other. You could close at home. That's the other advantage, but it's a brand new tournament. Whatever happened during the regular season, I don't think it's going to matter much at the end.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a great perspective to bring into the condensity of the league. There are no surprises this year. Everyone's pretty much seen each other. And it's that old adage, right? I mean, be careful what you wish for. in terms of your opponent. So I'm excited to see how that'll work for everybody involved with this new playoff format. Santiago, I want to switch gears to St. Louis City SC. We were both on the call with them about a week ago with the update on the Stadium District. I was blown away. I'm sure you were as well with all that they had to offer. And they offered a lot with this update. I want to ask specifically if there was one thing that really stood out to you from this update in terms of the Stadium District.
So I really like the format of the dressing room. Like it's not like it's like round and everybody's like similar distance to each other. Gives like the team more unity, and that's like the identity that this St. Louis City SC is looking for and has talked about during all this time. But besides that, like they look at every detail. I also like the setup. They mention for the way the academy teams are going to be like closer to the main team as they get close, like the 17 18s will be closer than the 14 15s, and as a way to look at that too, okay, as I move to the next step, I'm gonna be closer to the professional team and having chances to interact with the professional players. So I also like that, but they are paying attention to every detail, and I get the feeling that they want to build a world-class club, at least from what I have seen, a stadium, training facilities. Another thing I liked was when they were asked about how many fields and types of fields, they have a natural grass, artificial grass to be ready when they have matches against teams that have artificial grass. So they're thinking about everything. So I'm looking forward to seeing announcements about coaches, about players. Obviously, that will take a while, but I think this ownership group is paying attention to every detail, and they're trying to build a world-class club. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, that's the next step, right? I think we've got a lot of the pieces now in play, or at least we've been shown how the finished product, how we're going to get there, just because without the coaches and the players, of course. But yeah, I was really impressed with the openness of everything. Basically, you know, being able to see the stadium from the facility, have that motivation for players, and the connectivity, having everything downtown, be the first MLS club to do that. And of course, academy, first team. They're basically merged in a lot of different areas of the facilities. I think that's a great way to build camaraderie. And like you said, provide motivation for those players to continue to work their way up through. I also think this is important to have these types of updates because in a couple of weeks, we're going to have the 2021 MLS season. I know that St. Louis City is still a couple seasons away, but I guarantee you there are plenty of fans here in St. Louis who want to get into MLS now if they haven't already and are excited about this upcoming season, and they're looking for some way to get involved. In terms of this upcoming MLS season, what are you interested about? What storylines are you paying attention to, or what clubs will you be following a little bit more closely?
So I personally, I will follow any club that has Colombian players or Colombian coaches. Last season, I was following Orlando City. They have a Colombian coach and also a couple of Colombian players. Portland is another team I was following. They have a couple of Colombians, the Chara brothers. So I kind of like to see what team has Colombian players, and I usually pay more attention to those. Also this season, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to Sporting KC, since they will be the natural rivals when St. Louis City SC start playing. That would be like the Missouri Derby, so I'm going to be paying more attention to them. They have a good team. They had a good season last year. They have a good striker with Alan Pulido. Sadly, last season he missed the playoffs because of injuries. And what I also like about Sporting KC is their academy system. They have a good academy. They have promoted a lot of players. I was looking the other day. They have like 3 or 4 players who have been in the academy system like since they were 13, 14. Then played in USL. Were here to play against St. Louis FC, and now they're with the professional team. So it's great to see that progression, and it just makes me think about what will happen once St. Louis City SC starts playing, and if we will see something similar. I like what Sporting KC is doing. They have like a combination of veteran players and um, players from the academy system. So that's a team I will be paying more attention to.
Yeah, they've done a great job over the years building those things up. And Polito was one of my favorite signings from last season. His ability to score is just fantastic. Team I'm looking out for as of, at the moment. Of course, there'll be plenty of others. And of course, St. Louis players will all be watching out for them. But I'm interested to see how Minnesota follows up on last season, because in terms of when people ask me, what are your expectations for City in their first year? I always say, don't be Cincinnati. Don't expect us to be Atlanta or Miami or Nashville and make the playoffs immediately. I think Minnesota is a good kind of compromise between those two, because they've improved every year since joining MLS. And that's the important thing, right? You want to have a stable floor and continue to show improvement to get up that level. They were that close to making it to the MLS Cup final last year. So I'm interested to see if they can advance moving forward. But let's switch gears a little bit more once again, talk a little bit more St. Louis centric. Some news just broke this afternoon on this topic, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about former St. Louis FC players. Of course, you provided play-by-play for them when they were still in effect, and a lot of those players have now moved on to different clubs. Wanted to ask you your thoughts on maybe a couple of guys that you're looking forward to seeing with their new teams and how much success they can have in this upcoming season.
So, yeah, as you said, some breaking news today. Tyler Blackwood signing with Auckland Roots and Karim Daker signing with Memphis. And one of the players that that I'm most interested in and that I'm gonna be following is Tyler Blackwood, a great player for St. Louis FC. Also a great guy, always very open to talking to the media. I really like him on the field and outside the field. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do with Auckland in their first season in the USL. And also they signed Wolf Hall. So you will have that St. Louis FC connection. So I think that's the team I will be paying attention to. It has two former St. Louis FC guys. Obviously, any team that has a St. Louis FC guy, I'm going to be looking at and try to pay attention on how the guys are doing. It's sad that St. Louis FC is now no longer here, but they had a great team last year, and it would have been interesting to see what this group could have done with one more year. But that's not the way things happen. I will also, not in USL, but I will also be keeping an eye on the opportunities that Kyle Morton will have with Houston Dynamo. It's great to see guys moving up. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on all the guys. I'm glad some of them are finding new teams and signing with new teams and getting a chance to continue their careers. And hopefully the guys who haven't signed with any team yet will have an opportunity in the next few days before the season starts.
Yeah, definitely waiting on a few more names to get announced to some clubs. Definitely some worthy guys to can move on with their professional careers. Love all the names that you mentioned. Of course, I'd also just throw in Pittsburgh, now having Russell Cicerone and Todd Wharton on that team. And the success they've had over the past few seasons, adding those guys in is just going to make them that much better. So again, like you said, plenty to watch out for with this upcoming season. But of course, we still got a lot of soccer going on here in St. Louis. In addition to the ambush, like we talked about earlier, there's been a lot of news the past few weeks about different clubs, some of the lower professional clubs, some of the other academies making different moves. You've had Scott Gallagher announce that they'll be joining USL League 2. You had a couple of the women's clubs, Fire and Ice, the Lions, announce that they'll be in the same conference for the upcoming WPSL season. Just wanted to ask what caught your eye over these past few weeks, the news in terms of here in St. Louis and the developments that continue to push player development here forward.
So really exciting to see Scott Gallagher joining USL 2. Obviously, that's like a development league for USL. And what I'm excited about and what I want to see is obviously they will have some players from the academy, but I'm looking forward to seeing if they will bring former academy players that are now playing in college, like Patrick, the goalkeeper. See if they could bring Kip Keller, who is doing great things also with St. Louis University. So it would be great to see some of those players back with the team. Maybe Jansen Miller too. There are a lot of names, a lot of guys who are playing college, but it'd be great to see if Scott Gallagher having that connection with them can make it work, and we can see some of those players playing in USL2 over the summer. So great news that we're going to have some soccer at Soccer Park this year. And on the women's side, it's also great to see that both Fire and Ice and the St. Louis Lions are going to be playing this year. Obviously, they couldn't play last year. I had a chance to see one of their games in 2019. So I'm excited about seeing this St. Louis derby on the women's side again. I'm looking forward to that.
Exactly. I think that in terms of the Scott Gallagher news, it opens up so many more possibilities in terms of not just player development, but also who can kind of come into the system. And yeah, this past MLS Super Draft got me really excited. You know, we had a couple of former alums of different academies get drafted. Now with this addition, who knows how much more that can multiply. And then, yeah, of course, on the women's side, it's good that they're just at least having their season for starters. And then also just that, you know, competition between the two sides who've been able to build themselves up over the years will be very exciting to see. Santiago, I want to switch to a topic that is more close to home for you. Since you are from Colombia and you support the national team, I want to talk about an announcement from a few days ago, maybe a week or so ago, from CONMEBOL about this next round of World Cup qualifiers. They've been postponed due to the pandemic. Obviously, you know, that's been having different effects on different parts of the world, not just here. But I want to talk a little bit about what that's going to do for those teams, especially Colombia specifically. If you can provide some perspective on that end.
Yeah, so for Colombia, I think it's actually good news. Colombia has a new coach. At the end of last year, they ended the year badly with two bad losses against Uruguay and against Ecuador. That ended up with the coach getting sacked, and they brought a new coach who knows the players, knows a lot of these players from when they were under 17, under 20 teams, and he was the coach, but he hasn't worked with these players in a long time. So I think it will give him more time to work with the players. And Colombia has a really tough first match when these World Cup qualifiers resume. Colombia is hosting Brazil. So the more time you get to get ready to play Brazil, the better. So I think for Colombia it's good that there will be more time, but I'm a little concerned about this World Cup qualifier because yes, the March games got canceled, but just thinking about it, like April is around the corner. So who, like, I think the April games could get canceled too if things that don't change, and then you have like Copa America around the end of June, July. So it will be a very congested calendar for the players playing with the national teams. They will have to make up for some of these matches that got canceled between May and June, and then play Copa America, and then probably play some more matches after Copa America is over to get caught up. So I'm a little concerned about maybe the CONMEBOL is going to have to change the format. Another thing I was thinking about, but I don't think it's going to happen from what I have heard and from different people. Maybe the Copa America will be canceled, but there is a lot of money on that. So I think that's the last thing CONMEBOL will do. So if they have to, they will probably shorten the World Cup qualifiers, but World Cup is a year and a half from now. So the clock is ticking, and CONMEBOL is going to have to figure out how to make this happen.
Well, that's definitely why I wanted to ask, right? Because the international schedule, it's not like these domestic leagues who have been able to reschedule things. It's very compact. And as we get closer to the World Cup, it gets even worse. And I'm glad you brought up Copa America and some of those other things. They don't want to put the teams at a disadvantage when it comes time for the World Cup, putting basically the whole continent at a disadvantage. So I'll be interested to see the developments on that end if they can come up with a solution. But I just know it's disappointing because it's great soccer. I mean, those countries really go at it. And Colombia right now, I mean, they have some of the best players in the world. I'm hoping that they can find a way to pick themselves back up and get into it because I want to see James Rodriguez, Juan Cuadrado, Duvan Zapata, all those guys in the World Cup. Definitely think it'd be a shame if we couldn't see them. So
Yeah,
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 here's hoping they figure things out.
yeah. And the other concern, not only for Colombia, but other teams like Peru, Ecuador, who have some of their top players playing in leagues like Spain, England, Italy, is that and that's one of the reasons why these March qualifiers were canceled, is because some of the teams in those leagues in Italy, England, Spain, they weren't going to let the players come to South America and play with their national teams. Uh, the clubs have the right to refuse, and they could do the same thing in April or in May. So I think that's going to have a big impact in like a smaller like teams that don't have so much depth, like Colombia, Peru, Ecuador. Obviously, Argentina and Brazil, they have plenty of players. I think they will probably be okay if they are not able to bring the players playing in Europe. But I think teams like Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru will suffer if they have to play with players playing in the domestic leagues, or playing like in leagues like Argentina, Mexico. They may even have to use some of the MLS guys. So it would be interesting to see what happens with these CONMEBOL qualifiers.
Definitely something to look out for. All right, Santiago, let's wrap up on this. Like we talked about, the Ambush take on Dallas tomorrow night, final match of the regular season. Where can people go if they want to check out your broadcast and your coverage? And again, you kind of laid out the situation surrounding the match in terms of playoff implications. What are your expectations also for tomorrow night?
So let's talk about expectations first. I think the Ambush are gonna go for the win. They know that will put them in a good position. Obviously, they will depend on our results, but ending the season with that winning record will be a great accomplishment for the team. Also for Everton Moreira, the coach, it will be a good accomplishment for also for the ownership group, who has been putting a great effort, bringing new players and putting a team together. So I think they're gonna go for the win. They play Dallas, who is last on the table, but you know, in this league that has been short, and in this indoor soccer, like a three goal lead doesn't mean anything. So they have to play hard and play until the last minute. Hopefully, they end with a win and with some confidence going into the playoffs, and thinking about how people can watch our broadcast. So the league, the Major League Arena Soccer League, they broadcast the games through Facebook, through their Facebook page. Usually the games are pay-per-view, but tomorrow the game will be free, so everybody will have a chance to see the broadcast. It's the Major Arena Soccer League Facebook page, and you will be able to find the broadcast there and cheer on the Ambush.
Well, then good. There are no excuses for everybody. Check that out tomorrow night. The Ambush going up against Dallas, final match of the regular season. Listen to Santiago on the call. Santiago, it's always a pleasure talking soccer with you. Good luck tomorrow night with your broadcast and everything else going on for the rest of the season with the Ambush.
Thanks, Josh. Always a pleasure to talk St. Louis soccer with you.
My thanks to Santiago for joining me once again on the show. That'll do it for this episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Major heads up, there will not be a new episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show next week. Got a few things to take care of, as well as a birthday to celebrate. But I will be a part of a brand new episode of Atletico TV next week, so make sure to check that out. I'll be back in a couple weeks to, again, cover some of the great soccer that is going on right now and to help preview some of the upcoming seasons in American soccer. So be back in a couple weeks. Enjoy all the soccer. Have a great weekend.